Great. And if that's okay, can we start with our community agreements? So I'm gonna share, and as usual, I'm trying to. Did it work? Huh. Do you see them, or for some reason it's
No,
showing me?
we were seeing them. We were
Yeah.
seeing them. You
Okay.
just unshared now, but we were seeing them
Oh,
earlier.
really?
Yeah, you paused your screen sharing, but before that we could see them.
How did I even do that? Okay, let me do it again. Sorry. So share.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, great. For some reason I cannot see them, but that's all right. Uh, I kind of know them. Uh,
That's
Technology. And so basically everyone is truly welcome to this session and every session of Equity Unbound and MyFest. And everyone is welcome as they are, regardless of ethnicity, background, or sexual orientation, uh, or anything at all, any differences. And we aim to be to have a respectful event. So we criticize ideas, but not people, and we try to be intentionally equitable. So if there is something presented that is only in text or pictures, or we try to narrate as much as possible and add any other attempts to make it accessible to everyone present. And please do use the chat to text me if you need support with anything related to accessibility, or if you need clarification about something or any questions. Um, and because I'm doing this from memory, did I forget any of the points because I cannot see it today?
yeah,
No?
it's things like
Just
assume positive intentions, participate to the extent that makes you comfortable.
Yeah, great. So I'll give you, Verna, the floor to begin. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much. So now I am going to
remember to
share, hopefully.
unshare. So yeah,
Yeah,
may remember to unshare.
Yeah, that.
that's good. So now I'm sharing. I think I have to just is that sharing full screen?
Perfect.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Except somehow it's gone to the other screen. I have to bring it over here. No, it's not you. It's because otherwise I have to turn my head the whole time. Right. So I think I'm just going to move my laptop.
Would you like help in
see my slides? That's weird. Okay, so because I see all of you, in fact, which is great. I don't actually see the slides in the screen. Oh, because I'm not normally on Zoom, you see, so never mind. Okay, so
No, but I
also,
think Zoom did an update that's driving. Zoom did an update driving everybody crazy, so none of you are doing anything wrong. Zoom has been
oh, I see it's Zoom.
nuts
Okay,
for
no
about a
problem.
week. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, first of all, I think I'll just tell you who I am in case you're curious. So, it's how do I put it? Ethnically, I am Italian. I was born there and grew up there, and that's where my roots are. But I've actually spent over half my life in the London area in the UK. So I'm sort of in the middle, and I've got a very global network of friends because, of course, London is so international, which is great. So my role is I am an associate professor and PG Cert course leader. Now, in case you're not familiar of this with this term PG Cert, it's a staff development taught route. So in-service staff can take this course to qualify and to improve their practice. And so in the UK, it's relatively common that we sort of shortened it to PG Cert, Postgraduate Certificate in Education. It doesn't really exist in all the countries, but there are a number of countries that, you might recognize that. So I'm going to ask you to open. I'm going to open with a reflection. So I'm going to talk about this theme, connecting with students from the start. So I just want to ask you something. How do you feel at the start of a new course or module? Let's imagine you're an academic. I think most of you do have cohorts. You look after students. So you are now going there as a teacher, lecturer, whatever it's called, your role, and you've got a new group of students. How do you feel? Any feelings that come to your mind? Except I have to ask someone maybe to tell me what the chat says, because I'm worried to move and then I lose.
I can do that. No
Yeah,
problem.
please.
So Maha's saying that she's excited at the beginning of a course because she's going to meet new people, but at the same time nervous because she doesn't know how they feel in her course. And Jenny is as well excited and nervous.
Exactly. So yeah, and maybe more will come. Usually that's exactly what I thought. There will probably be a mix of feelings. We are happy to be there. We usually have this enthusiasm because we care about our students, but we're also a little bit nervous. Okay, now the other side of the coin, sorry. Connecting with your students. How do you think that your students feel at the start of a new course or module? Perhaps they've told you how they felt, or maybe you gauge it.
Shaheen has added that she's also excited at the beginning as an educator, but we're waiting for the response to the other one.
Yeah, exactly.
Trepidation, Maha says. They
Yeah.
typically don't know what to expect from each teacher. And surprised about my course because of the community building I do extensively.
Exactly. So I
And
actually have a feeling that what you said about how you feel more or less is mirrored by how the students feel. But perhaps I wonder if they are a little bit more anxious in terms of, what are we like as their teachers? Okay, I'm just going to use that generic word. Right. So I wanted to start with this. Yeah.
Shahinaz says that they come excited, waiting for good grades, and Dina says they come energetic in the beginning.
Good one. Right, exactly. So I just wanted you to transport you a little bit back to that and to think about those initial moments when we start a learning journey and the students start with us, just to remind ourselves that there are feelings involved, of course. And so let me just see if I can, let me just keep going. Oh dear, I have to find my mouse. Where's the mouse? Oh, here. Right. So I want to start with a quote. You might know this quote. The classroom remains the most radical space of possibility in the academy. Perhaps you heard this quote before. Yeah, Bell Hooks. And if you're not familiar with her work, absolutely, you should be. You should go and have a look at what she's been talking about and saying for many years, actually. So I love this quote because it talks about the classroom. It's a specific space. It doesn't matter if it's online or on site. There is a group of people. There is a cohort. It talks about the radical space and the possibility. And I love that word, possibility. So I come back to this quote over and over because it reminds me there's so much more than content. There's so much more than the syllabus. We are really helping our students to become something, the next thing. There is a possibility, the possibility of learning, the magic of learning. And this possibility could even involve becoming more than we thought, maybe what we originally designed, for. So for the possibility of learning, for the possibility that students become more than we imagined when we designed the course. So the question for me is, how do we create the conditions for that possibility to happen? I know a lot of Maha's work is around this, and she's done amazing. But one note, Alex said, the conditions that we create, of course, are shaped not only by who our students are, but also by who we are as educators. We bring our own selves, they bring their own selves. There's such a variety of profiles and characteristics of all sorts that we have in our learning spaces. And so we want to create these conditions, but then of course there is a context. And so we have to just acknowledge that context has an impact. And, we are part of that context, really. So I want to talk to you about 3 tensions. I hope you don't mind the word tension. I use that because a problem is something that you solve and then you have a solution. A tension is something you need to work with. You may have to just hold that tension. And I think all of us as educators, we do a lot of this juggling. We hold many tensions internally or externally to do with our practice because it's complex. Teaching and learning are very, very complex. So the tensions I want going to highlight in terms of connecting with students from the start are the imagined learner when we design the curriculum with the real students who actually turn up. Then I want to talk about mattering, sense of belonging, versus prescribed belonging. And then I want to talk about care versus capacity. So we have got all good intentions for sure, but then there are situations and contexts where it's not so easy for us to maybe embody the best and create the best journey that we maybe we could if we had ideal conditions. So nobody has got ideal conditions, but we can help each other navigate these tensions. So I'm really curious to see what you think about these tensions. So I'm not coming here as an expert. I'm coming here as a colleague who's navigating these tensions. I am in the same boat. I think no matter where we are, I think we can recognize ourselves here. So I'm not coming with the, sort of bulletproof type of solution. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this tension 1. Imagine learner versus the real student. So the question is, how do we adapt the designed curriculum, okay, the one that we prepared before the students came, for students we do not yet know, at curriculum enactment stage. So there is the design curriculum, there is the enacted curriculum. How do we actually adapt it for the students to actually turn up? Have you ever wondered yourself that? When you prepare a course, you're imagining maybe you've got student personas, you can do lots of different things. And then actually the students arrive. Day 1 comes, you meet the cohort. So there is an adaptation then, because what you designed was the orchestration, the hoped journey. Now you've actually got the real people. Now, why does it matter? Because of course we usually design for an imagined average student, and then students arrive with different experiences, backgrounds, expectations, aspirations, responsibilities, lives, confidence levels, academic literacies. They've got many different, so we got very spiky profile in front of us, and then we got loads of students, right? So what can we do? What helps? Well, one thing I recommend, I've written a book called Inclusive Learning Design, and one of the things I discussed quite a bit is early needs analysis. Getting to know our students as soon as possible at the start of a course. Now, I know for sure that wherever you work in your institutions, there are certain mechanisms in place, the formal ones, where some data is captured about the students at enrollment stage, right, when they are admitted. But those are generic sort of details. Sometimes they're not even passed to us. And perhaps they just don't tell us enough about the students. And we want to know them more as people. So that's one thing. The second point is orientation activities, actually at module level. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Low stakes diagnostics, if we can. So gauging where the students are at, what knowledge, understanding, and skills they already bring so that we can build on those. And making sure there is a mechanism for student voice, that they can actually feed back to us. There is an ongoing dialogue about how things are going. It's not just one way. And then very useful to learn students' goals and expectations. So we usually tell them, oh, the aim of this course is this, and these are the learning outcomes. But those are from our perspective. How about from theirs? What do they want to get out of it? What are they hoping to learn and to get? So all of these things, I think, are very important at course or module level. So I don't know exactly where you are, if it's the same, but in the UK, because we are a modularized system, students come for a whole course, but what they really share is certain modules. There will be core modules, there will be optional ones. So those modules is really where there is a family feeling, that situation that is formed. So when I talk about that second point, orientation activities, it's really to help the students find their place within our module and perhaps within the institution, but we start at that module level. So we don't just leave it to the induction that is done generally at the start of the year, thousands of students turn up, but we do something tailored to our module and to them. And that can be something relatively small, but still can make a very big difference. So I'm going to show you a picture of one of the contributions I had for my first book that also Maha very kindly contributed to. So this is actually from Maida Ali from Pakistan, that's right. And she wrote about e-persona cards, going back to the idea of orientation. So she has created a very simple questionnaire. It's only 5 questions and they are open-ended. And she sends those questions out to the students before the course because she has that possibility of communicating with them. In some settings, that's not possible. It's only on week 1 that you are able to actually send a message. So that depends on your context. And those questions are to really understand who the students are and what they would like out of the course. So things such as, and always saying, feel free to share what you want. This is confidential. Feel free to share what you want, not no obligation. So for example, tell me about yourself, tell me about your background. What would you like to get out of this course? Is there any particular area where you may need additional support that I can help you with? Anything that would help you in your journey? So this e-persona, I think the visual is lovely. It creates a puzzle. So in case anybody is not able to see the visual, you've got a central image of supposedly a student with glasses, and then around these there are puzzle pieces, so which form a profile. So the idea is that every piece of information you gain from that type of initial getting to know you questionnaire really helps you form a picture of the student. And it's not to label them, it's to get to know them genuinely. So that can be done, as I said, before the course or at the first opportunity, first lesson, let's say. Okay, so now somebody might say, well, I teach 200 students. Sorry, that doesn't work for me. I can't do that. So the goal is not knowing each student's story. The goal really is gathering the information and designing with learner variability in mind, rather than assuming everyone has the same story, the danger of the single story. So we're taking a UDL approach, University Design for Learning. Now, of course, if you have a very large cohort, it could be that you need to really make those questions limited in terms of the response, the length of the response. And maybe you only have 3 or 4 questions. That's still very good, but you have to be realistic. You might not be able to read, very long papers from each one. I do that anyway. I just limit the word length so that they just give me because we have to be able to manage the amount of data they might provide us. But what is good is once they've done that, we actually acknowledge it. So we go to the lesson and we say, well, thank you very much for filling this survey, without revealing anybody's name or anything, but I noticed there is a pattern. For example, many of you work and you come to classes either before or after work. Or I noticed many of you mentioned that you might be learning on the go on your mobile phone. Well, that's going to help me because I'm going to make sure that the type of resources I give you are suitable for mobile learning. So different types of data that we can gather, qualitative data, that can help us inform our design. So the first one, as I said, is first tension was the imagined learner, and then we actually get the real student. And when we get the real student, we basically want to try and get to know them as much as possible and then adapt the design in the enactment of the curriculum as much as possible. Does that make sense? Yeah?
But Virna, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The way so there's two things. The UDL already anticipates variability so that your design would be diverse anyway, right?
Exactly.
So that's a pre-design thing or like a pre-thing. But once you get to know your students, there's so many different ways to go about adapting for the learners. So I was curious about how you meant to go ahead and do that. Because a lot of people will say, but I already submitted my syllabus to my department. What can I change?
Exactly. So that's why I also made, thank you, a great question. So that's why before I mentioned the distinction between the designed curriculum and the enacted curriculum. If where you are required to submit a certain syllabus or scheme of work, depends what it's called in your area, then there might be very limited flexibility there, although it depends, because it depends how you design it. But then in the enacted curriculum, which is actually when you run the lessons, the way you interact with the students, what you ask them. For example, in my context, summative assessments are very difficult to change, very complicated, but formative assessments can be adjusted. So if many students express a certain preference or certain need, then you might be able to give certain choices in those formative assessments. The other thing is the way, as I said just now, the way maybe the type of resources that you share. If you were going to share certain articles, or even the other way, I was trying to be inclusive by sharing not just written material, but also like audio visual materials. But a couple of students actually told me that although they think they are quite visual, because of their situation, they just don't have the space during the week to do a lot of mobile audio-visual learning. They don't really have that quiet and moment. So for them, reading is actually more accessible for their situation. And so I think for me, it's more about, once I get to know who is in the room, it's about how I actually enact that curriculum, what small changes perhaps I can make in the way I engage the students, in the resources that I provide, in the formatives that maybe I set. So it's how I run basically the course rather than the design itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. I just wanted you to elaborate, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, that's great. Please feel free, anybody, to come in. So the second one, mattering versus prescribed belonging. You might be guessing what I mean. Well, first of all, just to say, I chose the word mattering because rather than, I just put it here. Okay, so the question, how do we help students feel that they matter without prescribing how they should belong? So belonging asks, do I fit here? To me, mattering asks, do I count here? So in many contexts, you might see them used interchangeably. I personally think that belonging is sort of like the big umbrella. Mattering is what maybe we should focus on in the sessions. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we've got to be sort of realistic because of backgrounds and, for example, trauma that people have gone through, etc. We can't always guarantee 100% that everybody will feel totally safe and that they belong in a certain group or cohort or situation or course. But what we can make sure of is that everybody matters, that we acknowledge and we invite participation from everybody. We support participation in different ways, and so that they feel that they are valued. So we are aiming for a principled space, as much as possible, trauma-informed pedagogies. But I think we have to be realistic. Maybe mattering is a more realistic goal, let's say, than 100% belonging in every case for everybody. So, for example, students feel why matters. Students feel more likely are more likely to engage when they feel noticed, respected, valued, psychologically safe, able to contribute in ways that feel authentic to them. And so, how can we make it happen? What helps? Well, students can belong, without feeling that they matter, unless we, there you go, adopt intentionally equitable hospitality. So we're receiving our students in our spaces. We're the hosts. So, I mean, I don't need to elaborate so much on this because Ma is here. But unless we do this, students will not feel that they matter. So this is really important for me. I always talk about this, actually. one of the ways we can do, definitely learn and use student names now wherever possible. Now, of course, if you've got online lessons where, like now, I can see everybody's name, is a lot easier because I can see the name. When you have an on-site, in-person meeting and lesson, and you have 150 plus, it's very, very difficult to learn many names. But what we can do is, somebody, for example, wants to participate, we can say, please, what's your name first before they answer, and then we can repeat that name back, try to gradually learn as many names as possible. So I know this really depends on scale, and we just have to be realistic. The other one is the UDL, yes, provide multiple routes to participation and provide peer connection opportunities. That's really important, that they can talk to each other, support each other, really that buddy system that we can sort of facilitate. Also, like you've just done at the start, Mary, and I know you did, is set and share transparent expectations. So what are the expectations for participation? Can we do something like what you did here today, a community agreement? This fantastic idea. Rather than ground rules, perhaps that's not so, like it's not warm type of language, but community agreement. We agree, and we agree how we disagree. Sometimes we don't agree, but how are we going to interact in that case? And use a small but authentic relational gestures. Actually acknowledge a person. Another thing which matters is if you are in an actual big space. I know this is a small thing, but if somebody says something, let's say a comment or a question, it doesn't mean everybody heard that. Maybe we heard it, but why don't we just repeat and reproject before answering, so that everybody actually feels that they can participate in that sort of dialogue. Those are small things, but I think you notice when it's done, and some people will notice when it's not done because perhaps they can't quite participate. Yeah. So now this is actually from Maha, because I didn't know, Maha, you're going to be here. So Maha has...
Veronica,
yeah?
can I just interrupt for a second? There are a couple of comments in the chat. Would you like me to share them with you now or at the end?
If they are totally related to what I'm saying. Otherwise,
Yeah.
if they're generic, we could do at the end. Depends.
About mattering, just that we have a book circle during MYFest as well, just in case anyone missed a comment in the chat. And Noah was mentioning that your idea suggests the possibility of designing an adaptive curriculum that intentionally leaves room for modifications and additions to reflect the students' needs. So that was her comment
Exactly.
regarding needs analysis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That it needs to have enough, a little bit of leeway where we can in the place that we are. That's it. We have to identify where is it that we have leeway and really capitalize on that. So this image is actually from my first book, Inclusive Learning Design, and it's actually connected to the narrative that Maha kindly contributed about intentionally equitable hospitality. And what we were trying to do, I don't know if there was a better image, but it wasn't sort of that easy to represent. So how do you make everybody feel that they belong and they matter in a space? So we wanted to show a table which is not all one level, is not all one type, one size. You can see the different users there. You've got people who seem very tall, people who seem shorter, and people who've got mobility issues. You've got different gender, different types of people, different ethnicity. So you've got a very diverse group of people. There's only 4, but imagine multiplied by, potentially like, by 20 if you've got 80 students. So now you've got a situation where you've got these people coming for the same learning experience, but you need to try and accommodate them. And this is why this links exactly to what the first point that I made. Unless we get to know the students as much as possible, their needs and preferences, etc., and unless we are intentional in welcoming people in our space and making them feel that they matter, then instead of this picture, we will have the picture of one size fits all, where people, say physically, wouldn't be able to reach or wouldn't be able to be seen or to participate. So this is a metaphor, of course. We're not talking about the physical tables, although in fact, of course, I wish we had that flexibility in the physical spaces. But we are talking about, of course, our emotional connection with students. And not only that, the rapport that we build which makes them feel that they matter and that we are doing our best to accommodate them as much as we can. And then again, of course, we have to be realistic, because we're going to come now to the point about capacity, right? But I'll come back to that in a minute. So now the question is, so the question, some people say, but university isn't supposed to make everyone feel comfortable, right? People might say, well, hold on, this is not really the job of universities. Now, it's true that students should encounter challenge, absolutely, and uncertainty, intellectual risk. We absolutely want that. That's what's interesting, isn't it? But the question is whether they can take those risks without fearing humiliation, exclusion, or invisibility. So are we able to provide intellectual challenge, provide intellectual risk, even risk of failure? That's the biggest one that students fear. But can they actually do those things, those risky things? Can they be vulnerable in the way that we set up the space, and they never feel that they are either humiliated? For example, let's imagine I'm sure you wouldn't do it, but I've actually seen it. Unfortunately, I've seen it happen, that a student gave a wrong answer and literally everybody laughed. And then imagine that student, like, do you really think that she's going to put their hand up again? So obviously, if it's very important to sort of straighten the record, then maybe we need to say, okay, thank you for your idea. How about this? Have you considered this? But even the way we respond when there is a mistake or a wrong comment, etc., that matters a lot. And I think we need to also be aware that we do have more and more international students who are either first in family, they're not familiar with higher education systems. They are maybe second language speakers. A lot of the times we get that. And then for them, speaking up, for example, is a big thing. So maybe we can find ways for them to contribute in a different, methodology, let's say. And I'll give you an example. I went to observe a lesson of a colleague who was very well prepared, with all good intentions, and he had a very international cohort. And then he was asking this question. It was about literature review. He wanted to find out what a literature review was and how to go about it. And he kept asking the question again and again, standing in front of the class, waiting for somebody to say, and nobody spoke, absolutely no one. And then he started circulating in the room, and it started to become a bit awkward. I was feeling a little bit awkward in that situation because the students were not answering. And of course, straight away, I thought to myself, I'm not really surprised they're not answering, because they are all international students. They will be so worried to say something wrong. Plus, they feel maybe self-aware that they have an accent or whatever, they might not express themselves properly, let's say proper English and or correct English. So anyway, that lasted a few minutes until he realized, and then he said, okay, please write it down. And I couldn't believe the magic happened. They all wrote it down. And then he actually had the idea. He said, show each other what you've written down. So that was just in pairs. And they all did it. And I thought, you see, now from a situation that was really awkward, he found a way for them to express what they actually knew. They actually knew it. Maybe one or two weren't exactly sure, but most of them knew. And to peer share, and then there was the plenary. I mean, we've heard of these techniques, right? Think, pair, share, and variations. But that's the thing. Psychological safety, making sure that people can participate. We don't create barriers where they don't need to be. So that's really the gist of it. So that's the second tension, right? So sorry. Yeah, that's it. A quote from a student. They see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students. But it would be nice if they could deal with each student with a fresh pair of ears and a fresh pair of eyes. That's actually a student who said it. And that really captures it. Can we show humanity to this one student? It's true, maybe it's the number 150, but they are their own individual self, and to give them really enough dignity, space, and support as they need in the measure that we can. So that's about mattering. So we're not prescribing how they belong in a space or how they contribute. We are just encouraging different ways of expression. So the last one is care versus capacity. The question, how do we support so many diverse students to settle in the course module so that they can thrive in their learning? How do we do that? Because we got so many. Right. Well, first of all, why does it matter? Students often struggle not because they lack ability, but because they're still trying to understand the rules of the game. Like you said at the beginning, they are trying to work out who is it. That's it. The third point: what you're like, what their peers are like. Yeah, that's the first question they have in their mind. So they're trying to work out these things, for example, how the course works, what is expected of them, systems, where they find support, what you're like, what the peers are like, how to participate, where they fit, and who they are becoming through this learning. There is a becoming process in this journey, and they are trying to work out who they are becoming. You know, it's like an identity shift, especially when it's a new subject altogether for them, let's say, in a field. So that's quite interesting that we sometimes go there focused so much on the content. Yeah. We're so worried about, oh yeah, this is what they need to learn, and this is but actually there's so much more that is happening that is really around that content that perhaps matters or worries the student much more than the content itself. So trying to work out these rules of the game can be a really big deal. So what helps? Right, so I think we have to take the module or the unit, I don't know what you call it in your context, the home base, you know, where there is a cohort that stays together over a semester or longer, you know, they stay together for a certain learning sort of journey. That's the home base. So it really helps when there is orientation to the module. When we start, you know, do we actually introduce it? The amount of times I've seen this not done, it's not funny. Like, maybe you're sharing the syllabus, give them the chance to annotate the syllabus. Maybe you discuss the syllabus. Maybe you can do even a quiz to start off, just to a fun thing, just to start thinking about different themes, you know. How about scaffolding participation and early feedback? Like, you know, you don't expect everybody to get to the certain level straight away. Scaffold that support, guidance, templates, exemplars, whatever is needed. Perhaps not everybody needs them. And early feedback as well. It's really no good to get feedback, you know, 1 or 2 weeks before the end of the semester, when it's very little time to make any meaningful change. Really, we need to engage with the students earlier on to give them feedback, and actually to get feedback from them as well. That's another story. And peer connections is so important. I set up triads rather than pairs. So study buddies, they are triads. So within the big cohort, there are these small families, and they are, I always say, they are responsible for each other's, to a certain extent, you know, for each other's peer learning and support. For example, one of them misses a class, they do a catch up, or they have maybe a draft of something, they do peer review. I set up a number of things that they can do within these triads, and others can be voluntary. And I have seen it's just worked so well. Sometimes the triads decided to meet weekly to support each other through that module. Sometimes the triads went on beyond the module, and they started projects together. It's amazing, honestly. So that's, to me, it really works. And timely support and signposting to wider support systems. And that's really important. The timely support, as I was saying before, you know, we need to try and identify especially additional needs early on, but also signposting to wider support systems. That's another thing I find. On the PG side, my participants are the teachers, the academics. And I'm surprised in a way how many times they don't really know what's available. Oh, I didn't know there was this service for the students. Oh, I didn't know there was this even department, or there's this guidance, or there is this particular online platform that they can use maybe to ask and offer support, etc. So getting to actually know what's available internally, maybe put your student goggles on, go onto the website of, like, from the student view, and see what's available there, and you might be able to signpost them to services and things that perhaps you are not even fully aware yourself that, you know, they were there. That's happened to me. So I love this image, and this is really what we're trying to do. We are not carrying students across a bridge. So the image is, you've got two sort of mountains and slopes, and you've got a bridge, which is one of those wobbly bridges with slats, but there are gaps between the slats. And then you've got the word previous learning setting on the left, above two students who are coming to this bridge, and underneath it says settle. And then to the right, you've got, when they've crossed the bridge, new learning setting on the top right, and top bottom settle dots, 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 because it's a process. And in the middle, under the bridge, there's the word transition. So I've been doing quite a lot of work about transitions with some colleagues, because there are so many transitions that students encounter. Of course, the biggest for sure is transition from whatever was their previous setting to year one of their course. That's for sure the biggest transition. But then even after that, the transition between one module and the next, between 1 year and the next, the transition when they finish into out of the course, maybe what they're doing next, or maybe they're working, etc. So outduction, we could do some outduction when they finish, not just induction, but outduction, actually supporting them for the next thing. So my really idea with this image is we are not carrying the students through the bridge. We are building that bridge with their help, and trying to avoid that they fall through the cracks, the gaps between the slats, that we actually provide enough guidance, supports, and sort of support systems, I would say, more than anything, so that they can actually make it through, and they can go from one settled state to a new settled state. But it takes a while. Transition is not one point. Like what I was saying before, for example, orientation. Orientation is not just 2 minutes or 3 minutes. It could be for a number of weeks. The relentless welcome, right? We welcome them again and again and again, and we explain again the start and what this is about, and recap, etc. So we try to make those links. And then when we notice that they need additional help, we know where and to whom we can signpost them. That's really important. So I really like that image, actually. So, but shouldn't university students be independent? I thought this was about autonomy and independence. But independence is actually an outcome. It's not necessarily a starting point, right? When they come to us, that's why they come to us, because they need maybe a certain amount of structure and scaffolding and support to learn and to achieve certain things. So let's take independence as something we're aiming for, not something on day one. Good transition support accelerates independence rather than replacing it. That's really my point I want to say. So, conclusion. The first point, we design for imagined learners, but teach real students. We want students to matter without prescribing belonging. We need forms of care that are sustainable and support transition. These tensions are not problems to solve, but sites of possibility, what we said at the start, that invite ongoing reflection and action from our part and even from the part of the students. So I would like to invite you to have a chat, just unmuting or in the chat if you want. And I just would like to ask you a question in my conclusion. Considering the three tensions that we discussed, imagine learners versus real students, mattering versus prescribed belonging, care, capacity. What is your experience in your context? Is there anything that you would do or change in your practice, in your context, in view of the discussion, in order to better connect with your students from the start? So I'm going to leave that as my final question. If anybody wants to come onto the microphone, you're very welcome. Otherwise, you can write in the chat. Actually, I'm going to move this because I finished with my slides. Nearly finished, actually. And maybe that's it. I can actually see the chat.
I would be curious for people to share what they do for each of these three things. I think there's a lot of people here who have a lot of teaching experience, and this framing is really nice to look at your real learners rather than your imagined learners. And I'm curious what other people do about that. And then also, how do you try to make students feel like they matter? And then if people teach larger classes, they can say how they do that. And yeah, and the care and capacity aspect. I'd love to hear what other people do.
Yeah, great. Sorry, I just noticed that I'm sort of, it's becoming darker somehow, but never mind. I think you can see.
I think your Zoom is lighting up on its own. It's
Oh,
doing
I see.
some
Okay.
kind of light adjustment, so you were all lit up.
But can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you perfectly. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, good. Okay.
Yes.
Zoom was adjusting the lighting on your
Oh, I
behalf.
see. Yeah. Okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
So, please, yes, if you want to comment on the 3 points, yes, because I could have, to be honest, I could have talked about 50 tensions because we hold so many tensions. But I thought let's just keep it simple. 3 key ones. Yeah. If anybody wants to come on the microphone, right, that would be great. Maybe somebody can share about transitions, for example, what you do. Is there something in particular orientation that you do at the start of your course? Oh yeah, please, Jenny. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been working, I'm not actually in the classroom right now, but I'm working with faculty for designing online courses. So I kind of popped in to see if you had anything about online versus in person. But one of the things I do encourage them to do is get a survey and get to know your students and keep track of, interests and stuff like that. So the figuring out who your real learners are, um, and then reaching out, not just, oh, you missed that assignment, but hey, great job on that last thing, sending those little notes of I noticed you
Yeah.
improved or whatever. And then I guess for the care capacity, I spend a lot of time in the resource I'm building going, you got to have a solid welcome module. You want those students before they start the first anything to know this is what it's going to look like, this is how it's going to work, and all of that. So, again, kind of just along the lines of what you were saying, but I didn't know if you had any experience like the triads. I love that idea, and we're actually looking at messaging apps. But I was curious if you have any implementation on the peer stuff with online. Ideas or suggestions.
That's good. I mean, there might be people here who've got actually more experience than me, although I do online, but not so much. But for example, today I did an online session. I mean, I know that Maha has got so many deliberatory practices, all of the liberating, sorry. They are all really good. But I think what's good is at the start, well, first of all, to be honest, I know it's funny, but I want to say smile because honestly, because I've done so many observations, but peer review of classes, part of my job. And sometimes I can see them, the lecturer is so focused on their own, trying to remember that they just don't smile. They're in their own world. And I think sometimes just relax, I say. And online, that works online, but as well as in person. So today was online. What I did is, I know that there are pros and cons of using Padlets because some people don't find them so easy for screen readers, for example. But in my case, I had a small cohort. I only had less than 20, fewer than 20, and I sort of knew who they were and knew it would work. And then one of the posts was, because you can see the name, you don't need to introduce each other, but the name is written on the screen normally. So I just said, today, because it was important to know their role and what they knew about this particular thing. So I said, would you like to share something that you're proud of in this area and something that perhaps you struggle with? And so that was a way for them to get to know each other, to introduce each other, to already talk about the subject, and to already uncover where things perhaps go well already or struggle. So I think you have a whole collection, Maha, about
Yes, like community building online.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm posting it now. Jenny, you know this one. The community building resources?
Exactly. Absolutely. One each, yeah.
Oh, I do. I'm thinking asynchronous, not synchronous. That's the problem I'm running
into. A
lot
of these have asynchronous adaptations.
Yeah. Yep. And I've looked, I actually have that. I have a loaner computer right now, and I have that link up on my other computer where I've been working on the resource. But yeah, like I said, I'm always just looking for new perspectives and ideas online because you can really get creative, and it's fun to hear what you have a whole lot. I mean, you have the whole. It's different You're not limited by, I'm sitting in a classroom, I have to do this. So I always like to hear what other people.
In reality, in a way, it opens up more opportunities. On the other hand, in-person exchanges, of course, can, you can do tactile, hands-on things when you're in person. That's the thing, what I do. When I have my in-person lessons, I literally prioritize anything which is kinesthetic, hands-on, making, exchanging, post-its, things like that. And then, of course, because during the pandemic, we were all online, whether we were teaching online before or not, we had to learn a number of things. And I tell you, one thing I really loved was Jamboard. I used to use Jamboard so much, and that worked perfectly with asynchronous as well. Unfortunately, Jamboard is gone. And at the moment, although I know there is Miro, but it's not quite the same. At the moment, I'm still on the thing that Padlet probably is the closest that allows me to do something similar. And those things, I tell you why they work asynchronously, because you can give that a window, to respond. Is I often say, don't just post. I usually make the point, please post and respond to at least one person. And then it creates an exchange. That's what's really nice about, for example, Padlet, because every post can have a response. And I think it just creates that little, sort of
I usually
connection.
put a different deadline for the first post and then another deadline for the response. Because what normally happens is people respond to the people who post first, and then the person who posted first has lots of responses, and the person who goes last has no responses,
Exactly, that's true. Exactly, see, managing that as well. And then, but I tell you what's interesting is I find sometimes, if the course is entirely asynchronous, well, that's basically like a MOOC, well, that's a different story. But if it's a mix, asynchronous materials and lessons, and then some synchronous lessons, in the synchronous ones, I think what's really important is to actually go back to that asynchronous whatever post that they did, because I think what's a bit disheartening in a way is if, like Maha is saying, maybe not many people responded to a particular person or nobody, and then you also don't mention it, and then talk about mattering, they feel, well, why do they even bother? So, for example, when I set a Padlet before the lesson, one of the first things I do in the lesson is, okay, thank you. I just share it. So, well, thank you. This is what happened, and thank you for this response, and actually acknowledging that. I learned that, I must say, it wasn't particularly well. Oh dear, it's going to be 20 years. I can't believe how time flies. So 20 years ago, when I did my MA, it was extremely sort of avant-garde, because it was one of the first ones that were truly from the Institute of Education, UCL in London. It was one of the very first ones that were actually hybrid. So there was this online messaging and posting, etc. I think it was Blackboard. And then there were a number, but limited number, of on-site lessons. And what I loved, actually, I must say, I still remember 20 years on, is when we went on-site, we knew, because we saw the first time they did it every time, that they started by acknowledging and looking at what people had posted. And I thought that was so nice. We really felt it was worth doing it because it's been acknowledged in the class. So I think that's nice. Oh, I can see
speaking
Figma,
of this, in terms of the surveys you do earlier, so other than the one Maida did, which was confidential, if you're doing just a regular diagnostic, it really helps students that you come back and point out things that they said, and this is why you're doing something in a different way. So, for example, I also get my students snacks, and sometimes in the weekly feedback on how the course is going so far, they'll say that they like a particular snack. And I'll say, oh, so-and-so said they like the snack, so I'm bringing it again. Or so-and-so said they want an outdoor class, and today I don't need the computers, so let's go outside. And sometimes I just put everything on the board. These are the questions you have from the last class, so they kind of feel like what they're giving me in surveys is not just going into a black hole. They understand what I'm doing with it.
It's literally informing your practice. I had a similar experience with the PG Cert. I did the initial survey. Yes, because I said, because I was asking some questions that can be relatively personal, like, your background, etc. So I said, only share what you want with me. And then one question I said, what you answer here, I would like to share. So just write only what you want, happy for me to share. And this was really about, I needed to know how many people were first in family, how many people were confident with academic literacies and writing, etc. And because much higher percentage of students, which my participants are the lecturers, indicated that actually they were very apprehensive about academic writing, which we were going to need. And then what I did is, we're talking about, how you adapt your design. I actually then decided to spend a whole lesson talking about different things, aspects to do with academic writing. And I told them it's because you indicated this, the vast majority wanted additional support. And then I've actually now dedicated a lesson to it. And so that's all of those ones that we said before. It's the care, the mentoring, and really the real student. There you go, responding to the real student. So yeah, some small things we can do. But honestly, I know Maha is a master at this. I think we have to also realize sometimes the changes seem small, but they compound. You make a few small changes, they compound. Next time you make a few small changes, and eventually you get a really much better journey and course that you had at the start. So maybe if I can just go to the next, just the end, I think although I finished, but there's just one in practice, that's it. Considering our positionality and responses to the questions can be, we can be more intentional in the way we connect with students from the start. And I would love any of you, if you don't know me, I mean, if you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, to connect. That's the only platform I'm using at the moment, social media. But the references, have got work from Maha and my book as well. So sorry, I didn't realize I was sharing. So maybe, oh, sorry. Am I still sharing? I am still, okay, now I'm
Yes,
yes,
you are, but we don't have a link to your slides so that we can then look at the references.
Oh, sure. So how would you like me to share the slides? Do I drop them in the chat here?
Yeah, are they available in a shareable way? Yeah, if you could put them in the chat.
I'm going to try to see if they...
And then May and Irene make sure that Yasser gets them. Or you can just email them to Yasser on the Unbound email, and then it's going to end up on the website.
Okay.
But if you can share them now, because people are here now, so they can take a later on.
I mean, unfortunately, I'm trying. Let me just see.
Maybe we don't allow non-hosts to share files.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I'm not. Let's just see.
Maybe, and I'm not a host today, so.
No, sorry, it won't let me put it in the chat. So I can literally email it to you straight away, and then...
Yeah, not to me though. So yes.
Who should I email
yes,
it to, by the way?
Yasser and the Unbound email. Or May and Irene, because they emailed you, or whoever emailed you to tell you they were hosting.
Okay. I don't know what I've done here, but now I am in a weird view. Okay,
you're not sharing your screen.
No, okay.
Thank you so much, Virna. I have one question. Dina and I were loving on the triad idea, and I was wondering if you do it completely randomly or if you use a particular combination. Yeah, I wonder. I thought Dina would want to ask that question.
Sure. Okay, it's a great question. So basically, I've actually written an article about triads and triad learning, because so in the UK we have a body called, for those who don't know, I know you know, but there's a body called SIDA, and it's a professional body for educational developers. And so this body, if you do the course to become a fellow, then on a yearly basis you need to write a yearly report, or you're invited, you don't need, but you're invited to write a yearly report of your activity, and that report is not sort of assessed by the body. It's peer assessed within triads. So what happened is, in the first year after I did this course, that's about 6 years ago now, the pandemic, I was put in this triad, 3 of us, and I just loved it. We just connected so well. And so because of that, we started going with our collaboration for all these years. In the end, we wrote actually an article about the triads, which I can add to the references, by the way.
Is it this one, The Enduring Power of Three?
Yes, the Enduring Power of Three, exactly. And so that's how I got really interested in the triads. Within the PG Cert, to answer your question, is I usually have about 25 to 30 students, let's say, who are obviously my colleagues. And so what I do is, this is intentional, because we're trying to promote cross-pollination. Then what I do is I set up, so they have a mentor, academic mentor, who is from another discipline. But the triad, this small family within the PGCERT, is as much as possible close to their discipline. So if they're in business, there will be somebody from business, fashion, for example, fashion, where it's possible. Sometimes it's just not possible. So the triads are disciplinary because they will then carry out disciplinary work together to develop syllabus, to plan lessons, to review, peer review, observations, etc. It's quite a lot that I sort of have built in for them to actually make use of this triad. They can do extra if they want, but there are certain things. So it's not completely random. Also, the other thing is we do, after the first module, I review it confidentially. I ask them to send me feedback about how the triad has worked for them, and where I have inverted commas complaints where it just hasn't worked, then I ask them, I reshuffle if needed, but it's very, very rare, very rare. Usually works very well. People really appreciate having a small group. They feel much safer, and they feel they can relax psychologically, sort of psychological safety, but also genuinely they develop they become accomplices. They develop the practice together, and that is such a strong bond. I'm surprised they literally become friends. It's very rare that the triads don't work. Yes, 3 I think is way better than 4 because you risk a freeloader. Better than 2 because if one gets sick or whatever reason they are not available,
Exactly.
you end up 1.
Yeah.
So 3
Yeah.
for me has been the magic number for many years.
Yeah. And so you're doing it with educators, but I can see how for like first year students, it would be an amazing way for them to make friends very
Yes.
intentionally, because otherwise they gravitate towards people they know from before, and then they're not meeting new people. They're not meeting international students, for example, if they're local and so on.
Exactly. It really helps them widen out. And also because then often in the class, what I will do, for example, I set them some tasks in between and the classes, then they come to class and then I will say, okay, what did your triad think? So you see, it comes from the triad. Again, that's to lower that pressure on individuals having to have the right answer. So it works really well. To be honest, it's been mentioned in the evaluations I get at the end as one of the biggest highlights for them, just being able to work within that small group. Often they implement with their own students, very often.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah. I mean, educational development, a lot of it is modeling, isn't it?
Precisely. And that's what I hope.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to remind faculty members, like educators, to tell them, by the way, look at how I'm doing this, not just what I'm telling you.
Exactly. I pull in the curtain from the design, behind, and I do. In fact, regarding the triad, after the first couple of weeks, we do actually have a chat, a bit like we're having now, and I ask them, why do you think I've done it this way? Do you notice any benefit, etc.? And so they think about the meta learning, and then that really helps them. Actually, that's why then you get buy-in because they have to experience it. It makes a big difference. So thank you.
I have to go because I'm doing a session in a little bit, but you guys can keep going for a couple minutes if you want.
Oh, thank you. The only thing which is really weird is that I've gone into this really weird view. Thank you so much, Maha. And I don't know why I've got this picture in picture. Because you know what happened is I was trying to share the slides, and when I tried to drop the slides, it changed the view. And so I don't really know why, but no mind. Okay. I can see a bit. Okay. So if there's any other comments or any other idea you want to share, I'll be very happy. Yeah. Otherwise, we can say goodbye.
Thank you so much, Verna. It's a great session. I personally enjoyed very much and learned a lot.
I'm glad. It's really like the purpose is the exchange, isn't it? I like this because you see, there was that. It wasn't just a presentation; it was actually an exchange.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice. Thank you. I see the comments in the chat.
Yes.
Well, I wish you all a lovely, whatever it is, day or afternoon, according to where you live.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you soon in more sessions with MYFest and outside MYFest.
Yeah, exactly. I will send you the slides then. Okay, thank you.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm hosting the next session, so I'm staying on instead of
Okay,
getting out. So I'm just
wonderful.
going to, just going to stay on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Virna,
No
so
problem.
much.
No problem. No problem.
Thank
I'll
you.
just claim host when I'm, don't worry.
Yes, I'm gonna end the session and end the recording.
Just end the recording and then leave and I